Every morning at 5, he boarded the same bus, with quiet face and a steady step. But no one knew. He was hiding something far bigger than himself. The sky was still dark when the sound of the engine echoed through the small town of Ashburn, Oregon. A thin mist hung between the dim yellow streetlights, and a cold air bit through jackets. At an old bus stop on Maple Street, a middle-aged man in a faded green jacket and worn backpack stood silently. His hands were deep in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched, but his face remained calm. No official record listed his name, but passengers simply called him the Morning Veteran. He never spoke, never used a phone, never smiled, but never looked angry either. He just boarded, sat in the same 4th seat from the front, and stared out the window throughout the ride. He always took the same bus, Route 87, precisely at 5 a.m., and every day he got off at the loneliest stop at the edge of town. There were no stores there, no houses, just a field stretching into brush and tall grass. Drivers came and went. Passengers changed, but the man remained, unchanging, even after years. Hank, a long-time driver who had worked the same route for nearly a decade, once tried to greet him. The veteran replied only with a small nod, and after that, silence. People began to speculate. Some said he was a war veteran with hidden trauma. Others thought he was just a lonely man killing time. But some believed he was hiding something too personal or too painful to share. Gradually, his presence became a quiet legend in the town. Even a few kids once tried to follow him after he got off the bus. But no one ever succeeded. He walked quickly and disappeared into the morning fog. One Monday in February, a young reporter named Lily Monroe sat at her desk at the local paper. She had just been reprimanded for writing too many light stories and entertainment columns. Her editor, Mr. Grover, said sharply, "Make people cry if you have to. Bring me something with soul." That evening, as she headed home, she saw the veteran again at the usual bus stop, standing still, just like always, with the same weathered backpack. There was something in his eyes, not confusion, not sadness, but a heavy burden carried quietly. The next morning, Lily arrived earlier than usual, wearing a black hoodie. She slipped onto 5 a.m. Route 87. Without drawing attention, she sat in the back, far enough to stay hidden, but close enough to watch. Her heart beat fast. If this was just a meaningless habit, her story would end right there. But if it wasn't, she might uncover a truth no one else had dared to see. The bus moved slowly. The fog grew thicker, and the veteran, as always, gazed quietly out the window. Finally, the bus neared its final stretch. No houses, no buildings. The man stood, pressed the stop button, and got off. He never looked back. He walked into the mist, and Lily followed him from a distance. Lily's shoes crunched softly against the gravel as she stepped off the bus, careful to stay a full 30 steps behind. The veteran moved with surprising purpose, his boots steady against the damp earth. He didn't glance over his shoulder, didn't hesitate at forks in the overgrown path, as if he had walked this route 1,000 times before, maybe more. The fog thickened, curling around the edges of the trees like smoke. There were no buildings in sight, no signs, no fences, just nature reclaiming space. For a moment, Lily questioned herself. Was this too dangerous? Was she crossing a line? But the quiet urgency in the veteran's walk pushed those doubts away. They passed a collapsed wooden sign. The letters were faded, but Lily caught a glimpse. Willow Glen, a place not on any current map. Maybe it once was something, a farm, a clinic, a forgotten estate. Then the veteran slipped through a break in the trees and disappeared from view. Lily ducked beneath the low-hanging branches and stepped into a clearing. What she saw made her stop cold. It was a small, crumbling structure, maybe once a barn, with makeshift repairs holding together. Wooden planks nailed over broken windows. A plastic tarp covering half the roof. Smoke trickled from a metal chimney pipe, crooked but functional. And inside, through a large gap in the wall, she saw him. The veteran had taken off his jacket. His hands were covered in grease. On the work table in front of him sat a broken wheelchair. Its wheels were bent, the seat torn. Around him were tools, screws, scrap wood, and bottles of glue. He wasn't just fixing it. He was restoring it, with patience, with care, and with a quiet intensity that didn't match the man everyone thought they knew. Lily stepped closer, careful not to snap any twigs beneath her feet. Then came voices, not from the veteran, but from inside the building. A child's laughter. A second voice, a woman's, older and tired, murmuring softly. Lily's breath caught. She inched closer and peeked through a slit in the wall. There, on a row of improvised cots, lay 3 children. One was drawing on a notepad. Another was reading a book with torn pages. The third, the smallest, clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. All of them looked underfed, but warm, safe, cared for. Near them sat an elderly woman in a rocking chair. Her leg was bandaged, a brace wrapped around her wrist. But she was smiling, and beside her, on a makeshift shelf, was a photo of the veteran, much younger, in full uniform. The American flag behind him, a medal shining on his chest. Lily stepped back. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a sanctuary. Hidden, quiet, unregistered, built by hands that had once held a rifle and now held hammers, pots, and bandages. The veteran moved the pot on a small stove, stirred something inside, then ladled it into 4 bowls. One for each child, one for the woman. He didn't make one for himself. Lily felt her throat tighten. Her hands trembled. She had followed a ghost. But what she found was a soldier still fighting. Not with violence, but with compassion. A battle no one would ever see unless they dared to look. The wind stirred the trees. And Lily finally understood. This was his mission. Every morning, while the rest of the world still slept, this man climbed aboard a cold city bus to keep a promise no one else even knew had been made. Lily stayed low, crouched behind a stack of logs. Her breath misted in the cold morning air, but her eyes remained locked on the scene before her. She couldn't look away. The man, whose name she still didn't know, moved with a rhythm that was neither rushed nor slow. Every motion had purpose. He brought the children their breakfast one by one, checking their foreheads with the back of his hand, brushing crumbs off their thin sweaters, straightening the pages of book that had nearly fallen off a crate turntable. The children adored him. That much was clear. They didn't ask him for anything. They didn't complain. They simply smiled when he came close, and ate their meals with quiet respect, as they understood the cost of what was being given. It wasn't just care. It was reverence. Lily finally stepped back. The morning sun began to pierce through the fog, illuminating the path she had followed. Her fingers itched for a phone, for a notepad, for something to capture what she had witnessed. But she stopped herself. She had stumbled onto something sacred. She could write it, yes, but would that help him? Or ruin the fragile world he had built with nothing but discipline, silence, and grit, still hidden in the shadows of the tree line? She turned her focus to what little details she could gather. There were no signs of formal funding. No boxes marked with donation labels. The supplies were mismatched. Food was simple. Some of the clothes the children wore had hospital tags, now nearly washed out. This place wasn't official. It wasn't supported by any charity or government agency. And yet it functioned. Because of him. The sound of a car passing on a distant road brought Lily back to reality. She carefully retraced her steps out of clearing, taking one last glance at the man now hammering a loose board onto a window frame. Her mind swirled with questions. How long had he been doing this? Why had no one noticed? And most of all, who were those children? Where were they from? Back at her apartment, Lily pulled out an old file cabinet filled with cuttings and town records. She searched local reports for missing children, orphan cases, shelters. Nothing matched. Then she looked up articles about the veteran community. Obituaries. Honors. She found it, buried in a 5-year-old news clipping. Staff Sergeant Walter Green retires after 22 years of service. Commended for his rescue efforts during the Taji base explosion in Iraq. Lost his wife and daughter in a house fire shortly after returning stateside. Declined all veteran housing offers and disappeared from public view. Her heart sank. That was him, Walter Green. a man who had saved dozens during war, only to lose his family after coming home. And now, quietly, he was saving more lives. No medals, no cameras, just a 5 a.m. bus in his two hands. Lily's fingers hovered over her keyboard that night. She could feel the story forming, something that could shake the whole town. But with it came a storm of exposure. Would he forgive her? Would he disappear if the world found out? She closed her laptop. For now, she would just keep watching, just a little longer, to understand the man behind the silence. The next morning, Lily boarded the same 5 a.m. bus, the same faces, same seats as the day before. The veteran stepped in quietly, nodding once at the driver, then took his usual spot by the window. Lily, now wearing a different jacket and a baseball cap, sat farther back, but this time she didn't follow him off the bus. She let him vanish into the mist again while she stayed behind, because that morning she had a different mission. By mid-afternoon, Lily sat across from her editor, Mr. Grover, her laptop closed tight in front of her. She didn't pitch the story. She didn't even mention the veteran's name. "I need time," she said plainly. Grover raised an eyebrow. "Time for what?" Lily drew a slow breath. "To understand. This isn't just a story about a veteran. It's something deeper." Grover scoffed, tapping his pen. "If you're wasting your time, don't expect your column to stay yours for long." But Lily had already made her decision. She would go back, not as a reporter chasing a headline, but as someone bearing witness. For 3 days straight, she returned early and observed from a distance. Every morning, Walter Green, she now knew his name, did the exact same thing, got off the bus, entered the hidden path, and continued a life the world had chosen not to see. On the 4th day, Lily brought a thermos of coffee and 2 sandwiches. She approached the edge of the clearing, but didn't go all the way to the structure. Carefully, she placed the food on a flat stone near the trellis and slid a small folded note beneath the cup. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She just turned and walked away, hiding behind the brush to watch. A few minutes passed. Then Walter stepped out. He saw the food. He stared at it for a long time, unreadable. But eventually he sat down. He ate 1 sandwich. And when he read the note, just a single line written in small, steady letters. "I don't want to intrude. I just want to understand." He didn't frown. He didn't throw it away. He folded it neatly and slipped it into his jacket pocket, then quietly went back inside. For Lily, that was enough. In the days that followed, she brought more: antiseptic ointment, bandages, children's books, thin blankets. She never asked permission. She just left them in the same spot by the stone. Walter never said a word, but he didn't reject them either. The stone near the trellis became something of an unspoken bridge. Lily left small offerings every morning. Sometimes it was food, other times basic supplies. Once, she left a children's puzzle set wrapped in brown paper. Another time, a tiny solar lantern. And always, she left a note, never demanding, never signed, just simple messages. "Hope this helps. In case the little one likes to draw. Saw this at a thrift store. Thought of you." Walter never replied. But every time she returned, the things she left were gone. And sometimes, in their place, something unexpected appeared. A repaired book bound with string. A clean, folded scarf. A hand-carved wooden animal, smooth and simple, left resting on the stone. He was responding, quietly, in his own way. One morning, Lily arrived just before sunrise, her arms full of fresh fruit and boxes of crayons. As she approached the stone, she froze. Walter was already there. He stood silently, arms crossed, watching her with calm eyes. There was no anger, no suspicion, just curiosity. Lily stopped a few feet away. She didn't speak. She just placed the supplies down slowly, then stepped back. Walter glanced at the box of crayons. "Those will run out fast," he said softly, voice rough like gravel. Lily blinked, startled. It was the first time she had ever heard him speak. "I'll bring more," she replied. A pause. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and said, They're not from the system, if that's what you're wondering. Lily nodded. I figured. Another long silence. Then Walter bent down, picked up the box, and turned to go, but just before he disappeared into the trees, he said over his shoulder, "You can follow me, if you walk slow." They walked together, not side by side, but within earshot, through the overgrown path, under branches heavy with dew, until they reached the clearing, and the structure. Lily saw it again, now in the glow of early light. The roof patched with tarp and tin. The door made of scrap wood, yet it didn't look broken. It looked lived in, maintained, cared for. Inside, the children were awake. One was brushing the other's hair with a tiny pink comb. The elderly woman from before sat by the stove, stirring something in a pot. Lily stepped forward but didn't enter. Walter held up a hand. "Not yet," he said. "They're not ready for questions." "I'm not here to ask any," Lily replied quietly. "I just wanted to understand." Walter looked at her again, this time with something like relief or perhaps respect. "You'll need to come back," he said. And with that, he disappeared inside. Lily returned the next day, not as a reporter, not as an outsider, but as someone slowly being let in. Walter didn't greet her. He simply left the door unlatched. And that, for him, was enough. The inside of the shelter looked even smaller up close. The walls were patched with mismatched boards. The air smelled with smoke, damp earth, and something simmering on the stove. Beans, maybe, or rice. The children looked at her briefly, then returned to their tasks. No one asked her name. No one demanded an explanation. There was only quiet. And the sense that silence here wasn't emptiness. It was protection. The woman by the stove finally glanced up. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "You with him?" she asked. "I'm just here to help," Lily replied. The woman smiled faintly. That's what he said, too. Lily spent the afternoon sorting supplies. She didn't take pictures, didn't take notes. She helped fix a broken drawer. She read aloud from a picture book. She offered to cook, but Walter shook his head. Cooking was his domain. He spoke very little. But when he did, it was always about the practical. The generator that needed rewiring, the cold snap coming next week, the rat that had chewed through a cereal bag last night. Never about himself. Not once. But Lily learned things anyway. From the way he measured portions, always too small for himself. From how he kept every nail, every bit of wood, nothing was wasted. From how he sat near the door at night, boots still on, as if waiting for something he never spoke of. This wasn't a temporary camp. It was a life. One he had built with no permission, no spotlight, and no support, other than the strength in his back and the discipline in his bones. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the clearing gold, Lily finally asked a question. "Why here?" Walter was carving something by the window. He didn't look up, because this is where the noise stops. Lily nodded slowly. "And them?" "The kids." Walter paused. "I found the first one behind a dumpster 2 winters ago," he said quietly. "The others came later. Some wandered. Some were dropped." Lily swallowed hard. "You took them in. Just like that." Walter nodded once. "Someone had to. That was all. No drama. No pity. Just fact." And in that moment, Lily realized the truth. Walter wasn't hiding. He wasn't ashamed. He simply didn't believe the world cared enough to notice what he had done. The days passed with rhythm and routine. Walter repaired what needed fixing. The children tended to chores without being asked. Lily came every morning now, sometimes helping, sometimes just observing. The elderly woman, whom Lily learned was called Mags, had once worked as a nurse before injury. She had no family left. Walter had found her sleeping under a collapsed bridge 2 years ago. The makeshift shelter had no electricity most nights, just candles, and when the solar lanterns worked, a dim orange glow. But somehow, it felt safer than any place Lily had known. Still, outside this hidden world, time moved differently. Spring crept in slowly, and with it came a heavy warning in the air. The wind shifted. The ground softened underfoot, and the sky turned dark more often. One night, while Lily sat with Mags, threading a worn blanket. Thunder rolled over the hills. Walter stood at the window, jaw clenched. "We need to secure the roof," he muttered. He worked into the night. Lily tried to help, but Walter moved with fierce speed, hammering, tying down, reinforcing weak beams. His urgency wasn't panic. It was memory. The storm hit at dawn. Rain slammed down like bullets. Wind screamed through the trees. One of the back walls, already weakened by rot, buckled under pressure. The children huddled together, silent but wide-eyed. Lily and Walter shoved crates against the holes. Water poured in through the gaps in the roof. Buckets were set, blankets soaked. The little one, Mina, started to cry. Walter knelt beside her and placed her stuffed rabbit in her arms. "It's okay, soldier," he whispered. Storms pass. By noon, the worst of it was over, but the damage was clear. Half the roof was torn. The food storage was flooded. The generator was soaked and useless. A large branch had crashed into the sidewall, breaking apart the pantry shelves. Lily stood in the mud-soaked floor, heart racing. This place isn't going to hold up through the next one. Walter didn't respond. He just kept working. But Lily saw it. In his hands, in the slump of his shoulders. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. Not physically, deeply, as if the weight he had carried alone for years had finally become too much. And she knew, in that moment, what she had to do. That evening, as Walter repaired the roof by flashlight, Lily returned to town. She didn't go home. She went straight to the newsroom. Her laptop shook beneath her fingers as she opened a blank page. And for the first time in her career, she wrote without holding back. No exaggeration. No embellishment. Just truth. She told the story of a man who had fought in silence long after the war ended. A man who built a home from scraps for those the world had thrown away. A man who rode a bus at 5 a.m. every morning. Because it was the only way to keep a promise no one had ever heard. She hit send, then sat in the dark, waiting. Lily didn't sleep that night. Her phone buzzed constantly. Emails, messages, calls from numbers she didn't recognize. By sunrise, her article had spread beyond Ashburn. A regional radio picked it up. A national blogger reposted it. Then a morning TV show read a passage live on air. The headline struck like lightning. The 5 a.m. Ghost, one veteran silent mission to shelter the forgotten. It was everywhere, and so was the response. By noon, donations began pouring in. Blankets, food, tools. A local hardware store offered lumber and roofing supplies. A retired contractor offered to rebuild the shelter for free. People came, quietly at first, parking far down the road, walking the muddy trail with boxes in their arms and tears in their eyes. Walter didn't say a word. He stood by the doorway, arms folded across his chest, watching people carrying crates of water, sleeping mats, and canned food. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But he also didn't stop them. Lily stood beside him. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I didn't ask for this," he replied. "No," she said, "but they need it." Walter looked over at the children, their eyes wide with wonder as strangers handed them new books, stuffed toys, warm socks. He exhaled slowly. They're not used to kindness this loud. By sunset, the shelter looked like a different place. The roof was covered. The back wall was reinforced. A portable heater hummed in the corner. A local cafe had sent dinner for everyone, hot stew and fresh bread. For once, the children ate until their plates were clean and still had seconds. Walter didn't sit. He moved from corner to corner, checking beams, adjusting shelves, straightening anything that fell off. His hands never stopped working, as if motion kept his thoughts from catching up. But eventually, just after midnight, when the last volunteer had left and the fire in the stove glowed low, Walter finally sat at the edge of the doorway. Lily joined him. For a while, they said nothing. Then Walter spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't build this to be seen." "I know," Lily said. He looked out at the quiet clearing, now strung with soft lights powered by a borrowed generator. "I thought if no one knew, it couldn't be taken away." "And now?" she asked. He was silent for a long time. Then, Now they're not invisible anymore. The following week, the shelter became a symbol. Media vans appeared at the edge of the trail. News anchors tried to film from a distance. Volunteers arrived in waves, some bringing help, others just wanting a photo or a handshake. Lily watched it all unfold, her stomach tight with guilt. She had opened the door, and now she wasn't sure how to close it again. Walter stayed silent. He didn't speak to the reporters, didn't pose for any cameras. He simply worked, as he always had, repairing a broken chair, sweeping out rainwater, holding the little one's hand as she cried after a nightmare. But something had changed. The quiet was gone. The peace he had so carefully protected was slipping away. One afternoon, a city official arrived unannounced. Clipboard in hand, badge on his belt. He asked for permits. He mentioned regulations. He used words like code violations and liability concerns. Walter didn't raise his voice. He just listened, then turned his back and walked back inside. Lily stood between the shelter and the man, heart pounding. "This place is saving lives," she said. The official shrugged. "That may be true, but it's not legal." That night, Lily stayed longer than usual. The kids were asleep. Mags had nodded off by the fire. Only Walter remained awake, sitting in the corner, slowly wrapping duct tape around a cracked flashlight. "They're going to try and shut it down, aren't they?" Lily asked. Walter didn't look up. "They always do. You've been through this before?" He nodded. 3 times. Different towns. Different faces. Same ending. "Why didn't you ask for help?" "Because help comes with rules," he said. "And rules forget people like them." Lily clenched her fists. "But this time is different. The world saw you." Walter finally met her eyes. They didn't see me," he said quietly. "They saw a story." The next morning, Lily wrote again. This time, she didn't write about Walter. She wrote about the children. She wrote about a girl who used to sleep behind a bus station and now smiled when she colored sunflowers. A boy who used to steal food and now asked if everyone else had eaten first. An old woman who had been forgotten by every system, but remembered by a man who asked nothing in return. She didn't ask for pity. She asked for protection. The article went viral faster than the first. Within 48 hours, local nonprofits, veterans groups, and child welfare advocates rallied behind the shelter. A law professor from Portland offered to help file emergency paperwork. A retired judge contacted the mayor directly. The city was flooded with public pressure. Lily returned to the clearing 3 days later with a document in hand. Official recognition of the shelter as a temporary safe housing zone under Oregon Emergency Relief Code. Walter took it without a word. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Just barely. But it was real. The storm had passed. Not just the one that tore through the roof, but the one that had nearly dismantled the quiet life Walter built with his own hands. Now, the shelter had walls strong enough to hold. A roof that no longer leaked. Power that hummed through solar panels and backup generators. Even a sign, small and simple, carved from scrap wood. Greenhouse. Walter never asked for the name. He didn't even acknowledge it. But no one questioned it. Not even him. He still rose before dawn. Still packed the same rucksack with tools, a thermos of coffee, and sometimes a crumpled map or shopping list. And every morning at exactly 5, he boarded the same bus. The same driver, Hank, gave a subtle nod. The same seat was waiting, 4th in the front, right by the window. And Walter still sat in silence, watching the town pass by under a sleepy sky. Only now, people noticed. The grocery clerk who used to ignore him now offered him a quiet smile when he passed. The woman at the hardware store always added an extra roll of tape to his bag. Sometimes, strangers approached with hushed words of thanks, or letters scribbled by children whose names he didn't recognize. But Walter never lingered. At the same lonely stop, he still got off, still walked the familiar trail, still vanished into the trees. But behind him now came others, not in crowds, not for photos, just volunteers, carrying sacks of rice, stacks of blankets, bundles of nails and rope. They walked quietly, learning the rules of this place without being told. They didn't ask for speeches. They didn't call him a hero. They just helped. One evening, Lily arrived later than usual. Walter was seated outside, watching the trees sway under a golden sky. Mags was knitting. The kids were laughing somewhere inside, their voices bouncing off wooden walls like wind chimes. Lily sat beside him on the step. "They offer to name a city block after you," she said. Walter chuckled dryly. "What would they even call it? Sergeant Green Avenue?" He shook his head. "Too long." "What about the 5 a.m. way?" Lily suggested. Walter didn't answer, but after a long pause he whispered, "That's not bad." Later that night, alone in his room, Walter sat before a small mirror. He didn't look at the wrinkles, or the scar beneath his collarbone, or the gray in his beard. He looked at the steadiness in his eyes. The same eyes that once stared across a battlefield, that once watched a house burn with everything he loved inside it, that now watched over a place where no one was invisible. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself a thought he had buried long ago. "I'm still needed." At exactly 5 a.m. the next morning, Walter Green boarded his bus. Same stop, same seat, same quiet mission. But now the world knew, and they followed not to praise him, but to walk behind him, in the path he had quietly cleared. One ride, one repair, one life at a time.